it is complicated, it is divisive, it is at times uncomfortable, and do have to acknowledge that, we don't live in Africa. We did not live through the history. We did not, we're not subjected to it. We don't have family members who've lived through it or currently live there. We're all white. We talk like this is uncomfortable stuff. But it is going to, in my opinion, get even worse. And I think it's just important to put all the cards out and let people understand, comprehend where this is all coming from and where it all started and how it has evolved as well. Because there's no right, wrong. There's no good guy, bad guy in this one. There's definitely a lot of nuance. And I don't know if honestly sports and fighting and the UFC cage fighting in particular is the best place for all this stuff. Pro wrestling has been tapping into this type of stuff for decades upon decades. But other than some instances here and there, I can think of a few rivalries that tapped into this type of stuff. We have been spared. We have been spared from it over the years. So here we go. Let's dig into the genesis of this, if we will, for the next 20 or so minutes, and let's begin where this all started back on March 1st, prior to UFC 285, at a media availability. DDP was asked about becoming a champion and what that would mean to him. Here's his response.
Or do you see this as an opportunity? Now you do get to be the guy if and when they show up to Africa.
Well, I mean, did those belts ever go to Africa? As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand. I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC. Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa. We're African born. We're African raised. We still reside in Africa. We train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
Okay, so that's at the media availability. Some of the key words to look at there: I'm the African fighter in the UFC, African-born, African-raised. Obviously, there were 3 African-born champions, and they didn't just enter the world and then leave 10 minutes later. But those were, I thought, like the key sort of seeds to making this all sprout into the situation that it has become. On March 15th, so 2 weeks later, prior to UFC 286, Kamaru Usman was asked about these comments. This is what he said.
Did you see Dricus? Did you hear Dricus? There's Dricus du Plessis. That's a difficult name to pronounce. His comments about being the African fighter in the UFC.
Oh, I actually saw that. I think it was this week or last week. My one of my former teammates sent it to me. They're trying to be messy, of course. I saw it, and the thing about me is just I try not to be quick to jump on someone and really kill them for those things. I'm not part of this cancel culture, but though I understand what he's trying to say. But the one thing that I think he's failing to realize is, just because I go to China and my parents are in China and I'm raised in China, that doesn't make me more Chinese than the people from China. That doesn't make me more Chinese. And so just because you went over to South Africa and you're raised there, that doesn't make you African. So, I would say to him, it's just, try to be a little bit more careful with what you say and how you say it. Because, that's the thing nowadays is these younger guys and these newer guys that get up here and they just talk. They just, because they want to appeal to the fans, appeal to the people. But try to be more mindful because 20 years from now, that's not going to age well.
So there's Kamaru Usman, part of the Leon Edwards trilogy fight. Try to be more careful with what you say. Interpretation, all these things matter. And again, with a history that is so complex and divisive, and we all know where that history comes from and what it's all about, especially in that country and in that continent, but specifically the country of South Africa, where there's no denying and there's no interpretation. Like, it's just one way. It's all there. You can read about it, and it didn't conclude all that long ago, or I should say, it concluded not that long ago. It's hard to ignore. April 8th, after his win at UFC 287, Israel Adesanya was asked about DDP's comments. So this is now a little over a month later.
I want to whoop that. I want to whoop his ass so bad. I want to whoop his ass so bad. I want to do it in South Africa or Nigeria. And but he's got to do work. He's got to do something. Show me something so I can whoop that ass and I can show you history. I'll remind you, because you got to choose your words wisely when you speak on people that have come before you, people that paved the way for you. You got to pick your words wisely. You want to try and be a big boy. You want to bamba. You want to G with the big boys. You got to choose your words wisely, but I don't want to give him no clout. But if he does work, and I pray to God he keeps winning, I will gladly drag his carcass across South Africa. Wallahi.
All right, so that's after his win over Alex Pereira. Shortly thereafter, Dricus goes on social media and writes, "So you won't say my name? That's smart, you better not. I don't need your airtime at all. I have my whole continent of Africa, all caps behind me. Go enjoy your very spectacular victory at home in New Zealand. UFC Africa is far from being done at least another year. I'll meet you on neutral ground this year, and if you still feel so strongly about facing me and I take your belt home, I'll give you another chance to come to try to face me on my home soil of Africa. We are Africa. We fear nothing and certainly nobody." And so, as you can see, this is starting to get very personal and very divisive. Personally, this is where I started to think, what's with all the my home, my Africa, all that stuff? These guys are born in Africa, no different than me, a proud Canadian who lives and resides in America. I still very much consider myself a Canadian, no different than a Jack Hermanson who is from Norway and fights out of Sweden. Like, we've seen this, this is what immigration is all about. But again, considering the history, it's hard to ignore, all the other stuff around all of this. And it feels like a very divisive route to take, when all that needed to be said, in my opinion, was, I'll be the greatest African champion of all time. Those guys are great. I'm going to be even greater. I'm going to defend my title 20 times. I'm going to be the best version of a UFC champion from this country. They were awesome, much respect. But the whole, I'm more African than you because I breathe the air and I'm African born, African raised, is going to strike a chord. And it did strike a chord. Shortly after his comments, his coach, DDP's coach, Morne Visser, posted this: "As a coach, I don't believe it's my place to get involved with the politics between the fighters, but today I do. Dricus has been crucified by many watching him fight in the UFC for his gas tank. Well, here are some facts never disclosed to the public or his opponents. He has just had a nose surgery, which was supposed to happen 3 years ago. Total oxygen intake through both his nostrils of about 8% for the last 3 years. We signed with UFC knowing this, but we also knew that you don't say no for any fight that the boss man Dana White offers you. He doesn't like expletives. We fought 3 times in the last 7 months, crushing our opponents with almost no oxygen during the rounds. The problem was fixed last week. So Izzy, you are in shit with your one-dimensional fighting style. We are not going to wait for the UFC to come to South Africa. We will take the belt from you in August this year. And if you are still in the game, you can come and try to take it back in South Africa when the UFC comes to South Africa. As proven, Dricus, the real African with an African passport, which again, what do you mean? I have 2 passports. I have a kid. All this stuff, this feigning ignorance of not knowing what this would trigger and where this would cut is baffling to me. Finishes careers like in the last 3 fights in the UFC with only 8% oxygen. Just imagine what he is going to do to you, the New Zealander, with a full gas tank. Dual citizenship doesn't exist here. It's not a thing. It doesn't apply. You're not allowed. And so we continue in that regard, and it continues to get more and more personal. After that, on April 12th, on this show, I asked DDP about the comments. Here's one of his answers regarding them. It seemed like the first one that was up was Kamaru Usman, and he took issue with your comments and spoke about your comments, responded to. Did you see Kamaru's response to your initial statement about the African-born champions?
Yes, I absolutely did. I saw his comments, and I don't know if there's confusion, but Kamaru obviously didn't see my interview. It's Kamaru's. You probably didn't see the whole thing. So immediately they went to Dricus, said he is more African than Kamaru Usman, and well, the champions, the African-born champions. I never said those words, not even close to. I simply stated the fact that I am the only. If I'm wrong, I would say sorry immediately. Do one of them reside in Africa? And that I did not even mention this towards them. I didn't talk about them. I talked about myself. I was not aiming anything at them. I was aiming something at myself, that I will be the first champion that resides in Africa, that will take his belt home to Africa. I never said they weren't African or I was more African. Of course they're African. And I respect them a whole lot. I mean, Usman is one of the greatest to ever do it. Adesanya is one of the greatest middleweights to ever walk this earth. Now, I never took anything away from them in that aspect. The only thing I said is that I'm still residing in Africa and I will bring my belt back home to Africa, which is my home, where I reside. If we are sending out postcodes and addresses, mine's got to be in Africa. And that's the facts of the matter. I never said they were not African or I was more African or anything in that way. I only stated that I want to be and will be the first residing African champion.
So now that comment is fresh in our minds. Just for the record, let's go back to the original comment from March 1st. You heard what he just said. That's all I said. It was, I'm the only one residing here. Just for the record, go back to the March 1st comments.
Or do you see this as an opportunity? Now you do get to be the guy if and when they show up to Africa.
Well, I mean, did those belts ever go to Africa? As far as I know, it came to America and New Zealand. I'm going to take a belt to Africa. I'm the African fighter in the UFC. Myself and Cameron, we breathe the African air. We wake up in Africa every day. We train in Africa. We're African born. We're African raised. We still reside in Africa. We train out of Africa. That's an African champion, and that's who I'll be.
African born, African raised. And for the record, they have brought their belts back. So again, it wasn't just about who's residing, and I don't even know why that matters, but if it does matter, great. I don't know how you can now, I believe, feign ignorance and say, oh, I'm just talking about residing when you're talking about African born, African raised, and given the history, and I keep talking about it, and look it up if you want. I'm not going to give you a history lesson here, but just look it up. Type in apartheid, and you'll learn all about it. And it ain't that old. And to ignore all of that, to me, is feigning ignorance. Now, we move along, and after that comment on the show, I actually asked him specifically about race and about whether or not that's playing into any of this. So for the record, here I am trying to show all sides of the equation here. I have no dog in this race whatsoever. Dricus has been on the show, I don't know, 5 or so times. Izzy as well. Here's what he had to say about that. Do you understand why this may have rubbed some people, including Kamaru and Israel, who we'll get to in a moment, the wrong way, given the history between whites and blacks in Africa?
Well, to bring color into it, for me, is the most ridiculous thing ever. That is the one thing that from this whole thing that really pisses me off, to be honest, is that color was brought into it. I've never even mentioned color because it makes absolutely no difference to me. And to every single person that I know, it makes absolutely no difference. Color is not, it's not the topic at discussion. And if anybody is bringing in color, if is bringing in the fact that I'm white or they are black or any form of race in any way, that is, to me, absolutely ridiculous. This is a sport. This is fighting. Once you get into
a sport, once we get into fighting, sport as a whole is what brings people together. There's no place for race and mentioning of color at all. And that really pisses me off, that Kamaru Usman is somebody I respect extremely. And I've shared the training mats with him. And he went on to say, and he did not say this out of, I don't think he was at all being hateful or anything. He just didn't watch the interview. And he said, somebody said that I said I was more African. I never said those words. I only stated that I'm the one residing in Africa. And all of a sudden, it became this racial thing. And that is absolutely disgusting if I'm being honest. I don't see any need for that in the sport, or in any sport for that matter. In the world, this is about two guys fighting each other. The fact that I stay in Africa will be history. The fact that I reside in Africa, won't it be history? Yes, it will. So I don't see anything wrong with saying and stating the fact that I am residing in Africa and they are not. Not saying they are not African. I'm just saying I'm residing in Africa. I wake up in Africa every day. They don't.
All right, so that was his response to that. He says that, and obviously we take the words to heart. If it didn't become a racial thing, it definitely became a racial thing after Izzy's response, April 26th, in an interview with his brother, David. This is what Israel had to say.
I know who I see. I've already talked to Dana, and I tried to set up some things, but
Apartheid.
Now, I'll tell you one thing. Okay, you know what? What I actually really don't like, I'm gonna take him to school in the octagon and on history, because what he's doing is creating divide. You can't, knowing your history. I've never questioned him as an African, because yeah, you were born in Africa, South Africa. Of course, you're an African. I've never questioned that. But who the fuck is this cracker to tell me who the fuck I am, who the fuck Kamaru is, who the fuck Ngannou is? I'm like, are you dumb? As a product of colonization, you're trying to tell me who the fuck I am. You can take the boy out of Africa, but you can never take the Africa out of the boy. I never ever did that to him. I never discredited him as an African. I just, okay, there you are, cool. You want to make a fight, cool. But the fact that as a fucking cracker to tell me who the fuck I am, that pissed me off. And that's why he's my next fight. Because I don't want to fight anyone else. This one pisses me off.
So don't take my word for it. That's his interpretation of it. Right or wrong, that's his interpretation. And that clearly shows that he is bothered and offended by it. So that was on April 26th. I asked Izzy about the comments when he was in studio on June 12th. This is what he said.
I'll say this again. I never questioned his ethnicity. I never said he's not African, even though colonization, we don't want to go over there and all that stuff.
Yeah,
he is an African because he was born in South Africa. And I never questioned that. But the fact that he was being a dickhead and, we do be who the real African is, I breathe African air, all that kind of stuff. I'm like, how the fuck are you going to question me, Francis, and Kamaru's blackness, our Africanness? Like, who the fuck are you? So I had to put that out there and just, I want to educate him.
So he said it first.
I'll tell you one thing.
Yeah.
You ever heard of Ancestry on Me?
Of course.
If you do Ancestry on Me on me, I know where the fuck I'm from. If you do it on him, he'll find out where the fuck he's from. And I'll tell you, it wouldn't say South Africa. I'll tell you that it wouldn't say South Africa if you do Ancestry on Me or whatever thing, because it'll tell you where the fuck he's from and he'll know his real heritage. I know who the fuck I am, and I stand on that. No matter where in the world I am, you can take the boy out of Africa, but you can never take Africa out of the man. So I know that, and I never questioned him as an African. So who the fuck is he to question me as an African? I'm gonna manifest him winning this fight in the first round, and when he does, I'm gonna be right there in the cage so he can turn around in September. No bullshit, no, I'm hurt, this and that. Nope, we're gonna fight in Sydney in September. If it's Rob, it's Rob, whatever, but I already got a plan for Rob if it's Rob. But I really, 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 wallahi, Allah, hope it's DDP, because I will show him who the fuck I am.
All right, so it was the second round, but pretty much all of that did happen on Saturday. Shortly after that, DDP's coach, Morne Visser, once again went on his Instagram and addressed me. He wrote, just a personal message to Mr. Buttlicker Ariel Helwani. You are very big on trying to provoke the fighters and trying to stir shit up. You have tried your best with running down my fighter, Dricus du Plessis, with your bullshit racism comments. You were obviously in school one of those ass lickers who would burn your buddies, and I'm 100% sure you have never been kicked in the head or ate a fist, but yet you seem to know a lot about fighting. Not. Stay behind the computer, choose another sport, and leave the comments to the real fighters like Sonnen and Rogan. And then he says something afterwards. He writes something that I don't know what it is. It's not in English, so I'm going to leave that out because I don't want to butcher that. And so that's his interpretation. It's my fault. All of this is my fault. Interesting comments telling me to get out of the sport and leave the comments to the real fighters like Sonnen and Rogan. Obviously, Chael, a former fighter. Joe, not a former fighter, but awesome. And DDP, even on that post, wrote, Amen. After my interview with DDP, I asked his manager, Danny Rubenstein, if he was okay with the interview. He said yes. And I asked him if he thought DDP would be okay with the interview. And he said he didn't see why not. And I even wrote to DDP asking if he felt everything was fair. Didn't hear back from him, but my impression was that all was good. Then I see the comment, Amen, on there. So I guess I learned that everything wasn't good. That's an aside. July 8th, DDP knocks out Robert Whittaker in the second round, securing the title shot against Israel Adesanya. As you know, as he gets in the cage. It was very heated afterwards. We aren't allowed to play that because it's UFC footage. But as you all saw, it got very, very personal. And Izzy repeatedly used the N-word in the exchange. DDP held his ground. I believe, if memory serves me correct, Israel called him his African brother. And DDP responded, I am African, but I'm no brother of yours. Back and forth they went. Again, I wish personally this never happened. It would have been much better for the fight. And again, if you don't think any of this is going to be used in the promotion, just go look at Khabib and Conor, which is probably the last fight that had this sort of darkness attached to it. It will be, to a degree. I wish, because at the end of the day, they are going to fight, and this is all about prize fighting, and it's show business. I just wish they kept them on the sidelines, do the staring, and that would have made the interest even greater, I think, and it would have been perfect. It would have been absolute beautiful, and maybe that could have helped them move on from all of this, but alas, it escalated even more so. Dana White was asked about the exchange afterwards at the post-fight press conference. This is what he said.
You know, I know you say, hey, this is the fight business. People say nasty things, right? But the tension between those two and kind of the racial undertones and all those things, how do you...
What were the racial undertones?
Dricus says he's the real African fighter, and so, you know, Israel dropped some N-words in there tonight.
So what was the racial? Who did? Who dropped the racial?
Israel was saying over and over, yeah.
He's black.
50 N-bombs in there.
Okay, he's black. Who gives?
I was going to say, so you don't have any concern about the way the build-up, the tension between those two?
I could care less. This is the fight business. Israel Adesanya can say whatever he wants to say. Who gives a? Why are people about that?
Some people.
Of course they are. Oh, all right, got it. Yeah.
I mean, again, no, I don't think anyone's bitching here. I think we're just trying to understand it all, and I believe that this is feigning ignorance. And or maybe he just doesn't know about the history, but like how you cannot walk away from all of this and think that there are some kind of undertones is beyond me. And I'm sure there are people out there who are going to say, you're making a mountain out of a mole. Guess what? We're living on the mountain right now. It is a mountain. Whether you want to admit it or not, I'm telling you, there's a mountain that we're living on that was created back on March 1st out of these comments. And maybe those comments were a mole, but now we're on Mount freaking Everest here. And that's 100% fact. And so those are all the assets, if you will, that got us to this point. The good news is it's probably just going to be a 2-month build. If, in fact, this fight happens on September 9th, that's exactly 2 months from yesterday. That will be great because it's going to be, it's going to be quick and it might be painful, but it's going to be intense. Now, the other things that I just want, in the interest of full transparency, to show that we are trying to just educate and inform as much as possible. Obviously, as I suggested, look up the history of apartheid in South Africa, and you can probably understand why this is cutting the way it is cutting Israel Adesanya as much as it is. Prior to UFC 243, when Izzy was asked about Robert Whittaker no longer being a New Zealander and that he disowned New Zealand in a sort of way, he said, quote, "There's a line in the sand and you're on that side and I'm on this side." This is what the dissenters of Izzy are using to say, about like Izzy is now choosing sides type of thing. And then also way back in the day when he was fighting as a kickboxer in China, there's a famous post-fight interview where he said, "Black outside, Chinese inside, I am Chinese." And that's why you may see a lot of people who are saying or calling Izzy Chinese. I didn't even know about that one, truth be told. It was GC who informed me of that one. I didn't understand why people kept calling him that, and now I understand. So people are bringing this up as well. And so it is not clear-cut. It is messy. It is very, very personal. And I'm curious to see. I don't think there is anything wrong with saying, I'm going to be the best to come out of this nation. I'm going to be the absolute best. I'm going to be better than that guy, that guy, that guy. I'm going to be better than the Three Kings. I do think the way it was worded back on March 1st leads you to interpret it in a different way. And I also don't think that there's anything wrong with the UFC going to both Izzy and DDP. And let's be honest, the more divisive, like clear-cut words have been used by Izzy in the cage and in that interview with his brother, saying like, hey, we understand this cuts deep, but we need to keep this in a certain place. We can't let this go too far because this can get super, super ugly and just bad for everyone. Bad for you with your blue chip sponsors, bad for the sport, bad for, the sport in Australia, which is, they've had to fight hard to get, legitimized there. Bad for everyone. There's nothing wrong with a rivalry. There's nothing wrong with bad blood. We've seen it all. But we've seen it in the past with Rashad and Rampage. It bordered on that. Look it up. It bordered on uncomfortable, historic territory. Saw it a little bit with Colby and Woodley. Saw it a little bit with Colby and Usman. I don't know if we've ever seen it this clear cut where it could just get uncomfortable. And again, DDP may have not meant any of this, but this is the way it has been interpreted. That's the perception by some people, including the guy he's about to fight. And at times in life, perception is reality. And this has to be acknowledged. So he is now, saying, I didn't mean what I said, or, and his coach is also getting involved as well. It's going to be a very heated road to that fight in September. And I hope from all this, you now understand where we stand and how we got to this point. And you could decide whose side you're on. You could decide who's in the right, who's in the wrong. And that's where we are.